Hello everyone, I'm Navid Farooq, and today we'll be discussing on Ernest Hemingway's A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. And I have with me Tahsin Apu, Muntakimul Haq Bhaya, and my classmate Munanzila. So James Joyce
Thank you for
remarked,
having me.
you're welcome,
Hello. Thank you for inviting me as well.
thank you. So James Joyce once remarked that uh, he has reduced the veil between literature and life, which is what every writer strives to do. Have you read A Clean, Well-Lighted Place? It is masterly. Indeed, it is one of the best short stories ever written. Such a high remark for a short story, and for a long time, uh, it has been considered the classic piece of existentialist literature from the lost generation. Hemingway himself being a leading figure of the lost generation, this writing is considered a masterpiece in some cases. So today our discussion is going to run certain factors are the core theme of existentialism and nihilism, and how it runs through the writing style from and the context of Hemingway, as well as the themes and the characters of the story. So coming to Hemingway, Tasinapo, how much do you know about Hemingway, and how much of Hemingway can be related from this text? Like what kind of the context of Hemingway that is relevant for this text?
I think it's important to know, or like at least keep in mind, is that the time when he wrote this piece and the context behind it. So basically, he joined the First World War and he sort of witnessed the atrocities of the war. And then when you read his literary pieces, you can sort of see the reflection of it. Like he uses minimalism and iceberg theory. I think that's used for journalism, but he used that in his texts to basically use as less words as he can to leave room for others to interpret, which I really like and enjoy as well. I think it sort of lets the reader to have their own interpretations from the symbolism and whatnot. So I think it's really, really fascinating. And it's something I would say even today people can relate to it, especially now, I would say. Yeah.
Yes. So Hemingway himself has related through uh, a very simple in very simple text, and as with as little elements as he can, whatever he can
Mm-hmm.
conveyed in the story. So
Yeah.
coming to the story, we see that the primary story has focus on merely three characters: an old man who sits at the
Mm-hmm.
cafe every night, and there are two waiters who an older one and a young waiter. And as the old man sits in the bar every night, drinking away throughout the night, who has also recently tried to attempt suicide, the waiters discuss about him. And here we get context as to how as to certain meanings of why he tried to commit suicide, to which the waiter replies that nothing really, like uh, progressing the I think the core theme of nothingness, or nada, as it is said in this text. So more going more into the text, we see that the young waiter is impatient and wanting to go home late in the night, who has a wife, and he is more selfish in his motives and his understanding of the situation, who says that he wished the way since the deaf old man can't hear him, he says that the he wished that had died by suicide. But the older waiter is more sympathetic towards him, kind of like he understands, or he is empathetic towards what he's going through, what he's feeling. He's not exactly in the position of the old man, but he's understanding his position point of view. So from there, I kind of found like in even in case of somehow Hemingway relates to it's an expression of Hemingway himself in these three characters. Like, spoiler alert, but Hemingway himself committed suicide at the age of 61. So
He did, yes.
he what I felt
Mm.
like, uh, even if he expressed most or related most with the middle-aged waiter, who kind of stands in the middle of the two, the young waiter, if considering the time and the age and the generation, he stands in the middle of the old man and the young waiter, who is still confused about his existentialist feelings about the nihilism that surrounds him. So he sits at the way at the bar at the restaurant to and offering drinks. Kind of he finds himself a purpose in this surrounding. So
Mm.
going more into the text, Muntakal Mul Bhaiya, so I was asking like even through the textual style, did you find what kind of relation did you find to this meaning of nihilism in this text from Hemingway's text?
Um, I think from the text, I did not really look much into the text, but from what I remember and from what I've seen is that so he deals with nihilism, which is basically the sense of nothingness, meaninglessness, and essentially that nothing really matters. So from his text, what I've seen is that he tries to convey thoughts in the most minimal sense possible. He tries to write as less he could, conveying more meanings than is what is written in the text. Like Tasina said, the iceberg theory, which is essentially it's not what it's seen. Like there's more to than what meets the eye. So essentially,
Mm.
what I've noticed is that the less he writes, the more he conveys, and which kind of sort of plays into the philosophy of nihilism, which is that there's not much to life, which also kind of connects to the fact that existentialism deals with the fact that you make your own meanings and you make your own depths in life, which is not apparent. And I think that's something he sort of expresses in his writings as well. Like there's not much to read, but there's so much more to, I don't know, infer and see and feel, I think. So that's
Yeah.
how I kind of related to the
Also,
text.
another thing I noticed is about the dialogue, the progression of dialogue. We see that in the
It's
progression of
very
dialogue.
confusing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
It's really confusing.
the speakers are not really very apparent. Like you sort of get lost, like who's talking and who's not talking. But if you
There's
do
not
follow the
coherent, yeah.
progression, yeah, if you do follow the progression, you can sort of take a guess that the young waiter is the optimistic one. The older waiter is sort of in between the deaf old man and the young waiter. Like if you think of existentialism and nihilism as a spectrum, where the older waiter is an existentialist, perhaps, and the old man is a nihilist, and the young waiter is, well, he's an optimist, I would say. But another interesting thing I've noticed is that if you read the text on your first time, you may not get everything. So the more you read, the more you understand, I feel like, the depth and the intensity of the nothingness that Hemingway is trying to convey. At least that's how it was for me. Like when I read the text first time, I was like pretty. I would say it was depressing for me. Like I could understand what he was talking about because I could sort of relate to it. So I feel like in that sense, Hemingway did deliver, even with his writing style, which is like minimalism. So I feel like one of the appeals of Hemingway is that even though his writing style is very simple and very concise, it still delivers and people can relate to it to some extent.
Also, like
Something like I'd like to add here, like um, these are like more technical aspects that we're talking about writing, right? Like the iceberg principle, the way that Hemingway wrote in a concise
Mm-hmm.
manner to that nothingness of the text, right? But
Mm-hmm.
interpretation that I also came up with, like aside it, was that the man was deaf, right? So as I was reading the conversation, I was picturing the man like hearing the old man hearing the conversations, and it's almost like without these dialogue tags, the conversations are flowing into the air, you know? Like it's just one after another, one quotation after another. We're just reading and it feels like it's floating above our head. So maybe for the old man, because he's deaf, these conversations of them are like that. Like, you know, he doesn't really understand who's talking what, and everything's for him just flowing outside of his world, you know, if it makes sense.
So like adding more to his feeling of nothingness, that nothing matters.
exactly. The fact that
Mhm.
he's totally isolated from the world because of his
He
destiny.
is, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and
That
another fact
that
is that
makes sense.
his relative died, I think, in the text, so
Yes.
that contributes further
Mm-hmm.
to like more intentional isolation from life.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
Yes.
like the interesting point that Munanzila mentioned about like how the dialogue, imagining how the dialogue flows for the deaf person, like how either the dialogue, the confusion of the dialogue flow is an error, or what I like to believe is it was intentional in part for Hemingway. Like it connects with the core theme of meaningless and nihilism, like who's speaking and the specifics of who's speaking the dialogue and who's mentioning the correlating the events of the story is not important as to how it just flows you through or extends on the meaning of nihilism, the flow of the dialogue. But there's also the argument that it could be an error, even if I don't like to believe it. Another core element
Error
of
as in from Hemingway's side, or just like, I mean, what kind of error are you intending?
like
I don't think there is like any error, so to speak. Like this is literature, right? Literature
Yes,
is
yes.
all about
Very sad.
interpretations.
yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
I think I read, I think I geeked out some stuff and I collected like from certain literary, there are literary journals, right? So they discuss about these kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So some argue that it was an error in part for Hemingway, or some argue that, and another person argues that in his literary criticism that it was intended from Hemingway. So from that, I tried to side with the person that who argued that it was intended from Hemingway. So moving
Okay.
on, one of the elements of this story is not core, but is the presence of alcohol and how alcohol plays a role in the story. Like how alcohol is presented in the restaurant, how the waiters presented, and how it differs in bodega, in how when the older waiter goes to a bodega or a
Mm-hmm.
bar. So
Mm-hmm.
how the presentation of it and how its importance signifies. So you could continue like the. I wanted to ask like how what does it signify like in case of the writing like the older waiter mentions that the way the old like he empathizes with the old man, like he presents the drink in a clean well lighted place which is different from a bar which is kind of it's bright but it's not clean and it's there's not a neat vibe or neat kind of
There's
feeling
no
about it.
dignity, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So there's no dignity in the present in the
Mm.
experience or in the experience of in engaging in alcoholic drinks. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that was an important discussion like you could bring about. Also,
For me, I would say how the deaf old man was served his drink. So that kind of gives me the imagery of since it's a clean, well lighted place. So the deaf man is in the cafe, he's drinking, and he's surrounded by two other men as well. Sort of like, I think he's trying his best to battle his isolation, the one Munanzila was talking about, like he's isolated from the world. So I think it's kind of his way to uh, get over essentially the isolation, maybe, or at least his attempt to reach out and connect to other people to some extent, even if it is just sitting on a cafe and drinking alcohol. On the other hand, the older waiter, he could not sleep because he was insomniac. That's why he went to the bar and he had to order alcohol because, well, he went to a bar. What else can he do? And he cannot sleep. So he has to do something. So I think for the deaf person, it would be it's like his attempt, like just a last attempt to see if you can connect with someone. But on the other hand, the older waiter, he doesn't really, he's not looking for that connection, but from the way he talks in the text, it does seem like he is hopeful that we can do something about our nothingness, this feeling that we feel. Yeah.
I think
What Pasinapu said, like the kind of interpretation I came up with, like later on, it was like kind of totally opposite. Like Apo mentioned how alcohol could be a way of, battling his emotions, like the negative, darker emotions. But when you think of it, the alcohol, this theme of alcohol, it is also a representation of self-destruction. Like when you choose alcohol, when you choose to indulge in it, you intentionally, like you consciously go down the path of self-destruction. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because, like, the deaf man, he tried to commit suicide, right? So alcohol is also, like, I think, something similar to that. I mean, he failed at his attempt of suicide, so maybe alcohol is just like pushing him down the road of self-destruction and
It could
despair.
also be that he's trying to numb the pain
Yes,
because you
exactly.
feel the pervasiveness of loneliness and then meaninglessness. That's what we do, right? It's just innate human nature to try and numb out our pain.
Also, I think there's a
That's what
mention
we
that
do.
he lost his wife or something. Like he lost.
Yes, like loss of a beloved one does drive one to sort of seek options to self-destruct, essentially, because you cannot handle and deal with the pain.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
So coming forward from that, I think there's also, like, in the discussion between the old and the young waiter, I think the difference between the young and the old waiter is that the young waiter uh wants to go to the things that he has, or there is a the there is whereas in the opposite, like, the old waiter talks about the lack he has, like the young waiter talks about, like, I have a wife to go to, I have a job to, I have something. And whereas the old waiter talks, like, I think there was a dialogue like, what other thing do I have beside, what do I actually have beside this job? There's also discussion of sort of lack. And in case of the old man, like, if I'm going by progression, like, it seems like he has lost it all. So again, coming to the main point, that the difference in different stages of life, the discussion about the different stages of life, as to the young waiter, he strives towards these materialistic feelings as a young man with hopes and aspirations and with something to strive forward to. And the middle-aged waiter, whereas he talks about something lack thereof, he's still in the confusion period as to how the things progress or not. And for the old man, like, he has lost all hope, and he seems like someone who has lost all hope and finds solace in drinking away towards the night. And the old waiter finds purpose in serving drinks to the people who need the drink, who need to find solace. That's somehow he finds purpose in that. And also there's talk of insomnia, like lack of sleep. So the repetitive theme of lack. And so, Tasinapo, you could continue more on the themes of loneliness and isolation, and how insomnia is a key element, and how does it contribute in the story to convey certain aspects.
I think it's a clever way of sort of hinting at how the old waiter is also having conflict within himself, and he also the fact that he can relate to the deaf man just shows that he understands what he's going through, because he himself is most likely feeling the same way towards life, because he does break down towards the end in a prayer where he removes certain words and then replaces them with nada, which is essentially means nothingness. But even though he uses nada in his prayer, it is still a prayer, which leads me to believe that he may or may not be still hopeful that life can get better. But for the time being, he does feel that perhaps life is meaningless and he's trying to find that meaning. But whether he will find it or not is still a question. And I think it's open for interpretation for the readers and how they view life or the world itself.
Interesting thing you mentioned about the prayer part. So, like, the use of nada in the prayer, like the use of prayer as a meaning, as an abject rejection of faith, but still the prayer exists in the paradigm of belief. So somehow he's rejecting faith, but the prayer exists in that system as
Mhm.
certain aspect of belief. Like it's an element of belief that exists. So I think that kind of I think you were trying to also convey in that point, like how does it contribute in that aspect. Also, um, so how does a story like this resonate, or the elements of this story, like the existentialist crisis or loneliness or aspects of nihilism, resonate with current audiences, and how movies like even I think Everything Everywhere All at Once or American Psycho, how do they express these kinds of thoughts, and how does it differ kind of from this text? Monanzila and Montakimul, hey, you can continue on this aspect.
I am not really well versed in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I know some aspect of it, but I don't think I have enough knowledge to sort of interpret it. But I did watch Fight Club. I think you mentioned it at the
Yeah.
beginning. That's something I think that deals with nihilism more than existentialism, because we said existentialism is sort of finding meaning and finding your own meanings in life. But um, I think in Fight Club, it's sort of this idea that so the main character, I think, has almost nothing going on in his life. So he sort of goes into this rabbit hole of, I would say, nothingness in this case. He starts to make his own ideas and interpretations of the world around him. Could you give me a minute?
Yeah. Also, like in case of American Psycho, what I felt like even Fight Club and movies like American Psycho, they are uh, uh, there is a body element of nothingness, nihilism, and existentialist crisis, and it is expressed more of as a rebellion against the consumerist culture, against the materialist culture that exists.
I think, but what I personally noticed in at least American Psycho, the 1.5 hour that I've seen the movie, I think it's the character itself is, I would consider Patrick Bateman as like a hollow character, because he seems to be annoyed at everything and satisfied with nothing. And the things he does, his actions are not really fueled by anything. Like he's not, I don't think he regrets, I don't think he feels emotions the way normal people do. Like normal people, as in like your every action has a consequence and every action has a reason. The things he does seems to be something he thinks he should do. I don't know if that's the case. So that's how I look at nothingness, that his actions are purely guided by like mechanical functions, not just emotional. It almost feels like.
Also, like the difference between the expression of these nihilism or existentialist themes is, what I found in this text is the setting or the expression of it is kind of in a serene way. Like it seeps through you. It kind of you kind of absorb the moments and absorb the whole situation of this nihilistic crisis. Like there is sadness, there is ideas of suicide, there is ideas of staying in the bar late at night. It's kind of a relaxed and serene environment. Like you kind of accept it in a more accepting manner, you take it. But
Mhm.
in case of movies like I think American Psycho or Fight Club or the modern, I think these are based on books. So literary pieces like this in modern cases is kind of like the themes are more darker, the tones are more darker. It's like in American Psycho, Patrick, the protagonist, goes off killing people as the expression of his despair, his angst against this consumerist culture. And even if he himself is a celebratory part of it, and even in Fight Club as well, like the formation of the Fight Club and how they plan to do blow up buildings at the end. It's more, the expression is more darker, and the themes are tones are more darker. The absurdist nature of it comes more alive in that case. So I think I found kind of these kinds of differences in this matter. And
Yeah,
last,
I I think Clean Well Let It Place is more of a positive tone on nothingness than the
More
movies.
gentler tone, maybe.
Yeah, it's less violent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's why like it's basically finding hope in a world where
Mm.
there is no hope, sort of that kind of feeling. But in
Mhm.
movies like Fight Club and uh, American Psycho,
American
there's
Psycho.
like it ends in despair. Everything ends in despair. It starts out in a great point, but it ends in despair. Even in uh, Fight Club, it's like it starts bad, it goes really high in terms of emotions, and it goes down as like big a deal it is. I think what's the movie called? Everything Every All at Once. I think that movie
Mm-hmm.
has a more, I would say, optimistic tone at the end, even though
Mm-hmm.
everything is like all at once. It's gone. I think if I'm not like if
I
I'm
think
not wrong,
Munanzila
but
can
still
add on
ends
this.
in a more
She, I think she was the movie. I think in the end, like there's a scene, I think, where the mother, I think Evelyn mentions to Joy, like even if nothing makes sense, even if nothing in the world makes sense or nothing is right, she would still like to be together with her. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of it also brings in the discussion of Jean-Paul Sartre's discussion of responsibility and choices. Like even if he rejects the concept of faith and God, but he still believes in people's fundamental qualities of responsibility and choices. So ultimately, I think I would like to ask all of you, like, what are your personal takeaways from this text or interpretations that you take from this text? And uh, another question added to it is like, do we actually find hope in the end? Do we find meaning in life, or does life still hold meaning? And uh, do we rise from this nihilism, this nothingness, from your own interpretation?
Moon, would you like to go first?
that's a really big question. I think you can go
Yeah.
first. I'll go
Okay,
after
I'll just break
you.
it down. The first part is basically your personal takeaways.
No, I do
No,
get the
no, we
question, but the
understood.
answer,
We
but
understood. We were just
the depth of it
discussing who
is
should go.
really huge.
It is
I
because
guess
you cannot really have a correct answer, so to speak, because it does depend on every person. Like for me, I'm an absurdist, like I mentioned before, and as for Moon, he's more of an existentialist. So I feel like we would have our own different interpretations of the text itself. When you say that, Moon?
yeah, for me, life's like like I actually do believe that you gotta find your own meanings and make
Mm-hmm.
your own choices. Like like it's not set for you. So for me, I would definitely go for the existentialism route. But
Mm-hmm.
also the takeaway from this is even though your life is batshit crazy, there's always this one, like I would say, clean lighted place. Yeah, for you to go to.
That's really well put, Moon. But I'm afraid I would have to disagree with that and say I don't think everything makes sense or they have meaning to it. But at the same time, I do think freedom comes when you realize that nothing makes sense and it's okay if they don't make sense or any meaning. And it's okay if you don't want to give meaning to something as well. It is okay to just simply exist and experience life as it is. So for the text, I would say I do hope the older waiter finds some sort of meaning in his life, or even if he doesn't, I do hope he tries to till the very end because uh, unlike the deaf man, I feel like he does have some hope left in him. That's about it, I would say.
I think we are left with only Munanzila's takeaways from this
Mm-hmm.
text.
The statement that Apu mentioned, that there's freedom in knowing that there's maybe no meaning after all, and you just kind of venture out and figure it out for yourself. I think that's really powerful thing to say. For me, I wouldn't like really classify myself into a existentialist or an absurdist, because there are times like I feel like each of these like forces, they're pulling me, like it's like a quicksand. I sometimes feel myself sinking into the depths of nihilism, like, nothing really makes sense and all that, and we're just like floating. But at the same time, I think it's just the experience itself. If we really question like what's the meaning of life, it's going to be different for everybody. What's a meaning for like Apu, let's say, it might not be a meaning for me, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be different for everybody. And if you can just find meaning in the experience of it, like just living every single day, and even if you're, let's say, suffering, or even if you're like very happy, if you can just have some kind of something to hold on to in those moments, like let's say for now, this podcast is what I'm holding on to, right? This is the reason why I'm present in this moment, right? And let's say if it didn't happen, I might just be lying around, but wondering like what should I do next, what should I do next. But it's a tangible element that is holding me to reality. So it's just trying to see like in every day, maybe there are some kind of elements which we can hold on to and carry on just for the sake of experience, because maybe life doesn't have any meaning after all, right? Because we're gonna die and everything. That's a lot dark. But I think death is really, for me, that's quite the fundamental aspect of everything, like the truth we're heading towards. So yeah. And as for the terms of text, so I kind of agree. Like I hope the old man also finds some kind of meaning. I think he already has, like he mentioned that the clean, well lighted place, it's a meaning for him. It's his place of dignity.
An oasis, as you said.
Yes, an oasis. It really is, if you think like that. Like he devoted his life to that one cause, and that became his meaning. On the other hand, for the waiter, the meaning lies somewhere else, right? Maybe it's not in a cafe, maybe it's at his home to his wife. Maybe meaning is there, and meanings can change it also,
At
like
different
at this
stages of
point
life.
of life. Yeah, exactly. Like right now, I have everything. Like I'm young and I have like aspirations. I have a goal that I want to achieve. Maybe, do good this semester or complete my graduation. So many goals like that, goals after that. But these changes along with time. After I graduate, maybe I won't be thinking the way I'm thinking now. So then I might feel hopeless, or I might aim for new goals. But these are still meaningful in their own way. I know I'm rambling, but I hope I make sense.
I kind of think that you kind of summed up the entire aspect or certain aspects of it, or even what kind of interprets for the text. And I kind of agree with you on the point of like living for the experience of life. So
Mhm.
the discussion started from the world from the World War I, from the lost generation, and how the writers who were young in the World War I generation, were disillusioned and didn't uh, found life meaningless, and how it translated to the text and to the modern literature and movies like Fight Club, American Psycho, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and how it translates, how this feeling of loneliness, this isolation, this meaninglessness, this nihilism, these terms still are relevant, and how the expression has changed, but still these kinds of feelings still tinge all of us at certain points of life. So, with that, I would like to end our discussion today. I'd like to thank all of our participants. Thanks a lot for participating in such a thought provoking conversation. It has been possible only by your participation.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun.